Game started.
All right. So we say have a good game. We are white, facing a 25Q. So when they play like this, don't worry about it. This is technically the best move, but it is not necessarily the best way to learn. So I want to learn stuff that I can play on the 19x19. So I'm going to play open corners first. Open corners first. I'm going to use the strategies that I'm learning for the 19x19. Now I'm going to go this one, not this one, because cross, I can't work together, so I'm going to do this one. So open corners. All right. And so now I have support on both sides. So I want to play the side and I want to play fourth line, but the fourth line is actually touching, and I don't want to touch for an opening move, right? So I'm just going to play here. So even though I want to play fourth line, I don't want to touch. So I'm going to play open side. Now I've established a position, so I'm doing good. Doing good. I don't care if I win, right? At this level, winning isn't the most important thing. It's a nice little extra thing. But honestly, the bigger, most important thing is learning to train your eyes for the basics. All right, so he's poking a one-space jump. So if he pushes, I'm going to visualize what I learned before, what I learned the last game. If he pushes and I block, I have 2 cutting points. I don't see a tiger's mouth or anything like that, so I don't want 2 cutting points, so I'm going to fix. My cutting points first. My weaknesses first. Weaknesses before big move. So because I have 2 cutting points and no tiger's mouth, I'm going to just fix. Right. If he peeps right here, I don't know if I want to fix because it's a little bit different. We can maybe talk about that more. So he goes in. If he goes into your territory, just surround. No big deal. Just surround. Push him to the edge. Just push him to the edge. No big deal at all. This is why we establish a position. Just trap him against the edge. If he lives, who cares? We're learning basics right now. When they go inside your area of control, you push them to the edge. Push them to the edge. And I get a nice little tiger's mouth to boot. So that's cool too. Push them to the edge. Push them to the edge. Push them to the edge. And if they play inside your area, it's okay to respond. It's not that big of a deal. You're not going to lose points. Just don't over-respond. Like, if they play outside of your area, now playing inside your area might lose you points. So don't do that. So if they play inside, you play inside. If they don't, don't. All right, so do I have any cutting points? No. So there's an open side, so I'm going to take that open side. All right, he does this. No big deal. I can actually kill this stone. So if I'm so my first instinct at this level should be I want to Atari, push him up, and protect my cutting point. That's my first instinct. But as I get stronger, my second instinct is, can I surround and push him to the edge? Like, can I just do that? In this case, I can. But I'll go ahead and just defend for the sake of defending. But you can actually Atari, and you see this is our third line basics, where I Atari and then push to the edge. He turns and I block. That's a sequence, that's a common third line sequence that we know, that we want to learn. So technically, we can do this, but maybe this is 23Q, not 25Q. Because at 25Q, we want to learn first and second line cuts. Or, sorry, second line cuts and first line liberties. But at third line, maybe it's 23Q, we learn third line cuts. And this one's actually that same sequence, Atari. He extends down to the edge. I block. He turns or runs to the edge, and I trap him. And that one's a simple sequence that I can read. But I'll go ahead and I'll just defend. Right? Maybe you're not going to play perfectly at this level, so it's okay if you make a mistake. The idea is you want to train your eyes to start looking for this stuff. All right, so now I have a lot of cutting points. What do I do? So let's fix the most important one. So this one is 2 stones. So if he goes here, I Atari. Okay, if he goes here, I Atari. But if he goes both, then maybe I get in trouble. Okay, I also have a peeped tiger's mouth. So what do I want to do? So let's just start from the edge. So if I start here, he cuts, I Atari. He cuts, I'm in Atari. I have to connect. And then these 4 stones might get cut because he runs, but 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I play first. So technically that one's okay. But let's start from the other edge. If maybe that one's too complicated, start from the other edge. I block this cut. He cuts. I Atari. He cuts. I take. He Ataris. This stone is in trouble. And at each step, I'm counting the liberties. So I connect. He cuts. 1, 2. A lot of liberties. 1, 2. So he has 2 liberties. I have 2 liberties. So I can Atari. Okay. He cuts. I have 1 liberty. He has 1 liberty. He has 2 liberties. I have 2 liberties. So I can capture. I have 2 liberties. He has 2 liberties. He plays first. So he Ataris. So it looks like if I block this one, I'm in trouble. But if I block this one, I'm okay. And then you could also check. And if your opponent talks to you because he just said, can you play a bit faster? As long as you have time on your clock, don't worry about it. Just ignore them. You can think as long as you need to while you're learning. This is a thinking game. Don't worry about your opponent rushing you. So if I connect this one, like let's say the 2 edges don't work, maybe I'll check the center one, but check the edges first, and then you can check the center one. If I connect here, he cuts, I Atari, okay? He cuts, I Atari. So this one actually looks the easiest sequence.
You have won.
All right, so he resigned. Cool, I won. Because I'm reading and he's impatient. Okay? That's fine. That happens, it's fine. All right, so let's go ahead and first we'll say thank you for the game. Let's go ahead and review this game.
Review started.
So what I was reading. Well, actually, let's just start from the beginning. Okay, he plays here. Technically, this is the best move on the 9x9, according to artificial intelligence. Okay? But we're not interested in winning right now. We're interested in learning things and working our way up to the 19x19, which is the official size. So we're wanting to learn basics that we can apply on the 19x19. So technically, the best response to this is this move. Okay? Don't ask me to go why, because there's variations and calculations and as to why, but the follow-ups to this are not the same basics that we're using on the 19x19. It's just different stuff. Okay? So I don't care if my opponent plays this. Yeah, sure, it's the best move. But I'm not going to play it, because I'm not trying to master the 9x9. I'm trying to master the basics for the 19x19, which is the official size. So 9x9s are just a stepping stone to me. If I'm in a 9x9 tournament, I'll play this. But if I'm playing 9x9 online to improve my basics to get to the 19x19, I'm not going to play this, and I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to say open corners first. Okay? And here, I'm going to play this open corner, not this one, because this is a cross. So these 2 stones, it's hard for them to work together. And I like my stuff working together if possible. So I want to work together. Okay? Now I'm going to play open side. So I have 4 open sides. So I'm going to pick the one that works together with my stones. And I, of course, want to play 4th line because I have support on both sides. But playing a touching move means I only have 3 liberties. No need to. Just play 3rd line. That's fine. He peeps. And so I checked. Can I play an open side? If he pushes and I block, there's 2 cutting points. No tiger's mouth. Okay? So if we check that, we can actually play it out in the review and show ourselves the sequence. So he plays 1. I push him to the edge. He plays the other. That's how you utilize 2 cutting points. You play one, then the other. So here, I capture, and then he plays this one. And this is a ladder. But if you also want to read the other way, push him to the edge and trap him to the edge. That's our 3rd line sequence that we know. This is also possible. So you can see that white is actually trapped. So you can see cut 1, cut the other. And if you also have to check the other direction. So if one side doesn't work, you have to check the other side. Cut 1, and then the other. Okay, in this case, I run and get captured. Okay, so that's the stuff you want to learn, right? You want to learn how to read those in your head. But our simple red flag is if I push and block and I have 2 cutting points, then let's go ahead and just block that. But when you get more used to reading out the cuts, then you want to read a little bit further and check if these cuts work. So, for example, let's say he peeped here, right? While I'm learning just the cutting points, I'll say if I ignore, my opponent pushes, I have 2 cutting points, so I'll block. But as I get stronger to read, or as I improve my reading, I'll read, okay, does this one work? One side, check the one side, and then check the other side. Oh, where does he go? He has nowhere to go. 1, 2 liberties. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 liberties. and he's trapped against the edge. So this one doesn't work. Okay, check the other order. I play here, 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 here. Oh, this one does work, because that's a ladder or our third line sequence. Okay, so that one does work. Oh no, maybe I have to defend. But if one side worked and the other didn't, then play on the side that worked. So, for example, if I played here and black couldn't do anything, that means I don't have to defend that side. So if he plays here, I don't have to defend this side because it didn't work. I just play here. And now it's the same thing. 2 liberties, or let's say 1, 2, 3 liberties to 1, 2, 3, 4 liberties, and I trap him against the edge. Okay? So this cut doesn't work. So, again, to the peep, we check and we see there's 2 cutting points. Okay? While we're at first, we'll go ahead and block those. But once we get more used to the cutting point, reading the cutting points, we want to read a little bit more. We want to check that. And the way I checked it is I checked the outside and walked in. And then I reversed the order. Okay? And if this one works, and if one side works and one side doesn't, play on the side that works for your opponent and then let them be trapped. Okay? So in this one, we can read. This one, we don't have to respond to. We just read it. Okay? The exception to this is when we read it and it doesn't work, but our opponent plays another move that takes a liberty, we have to reread it. So if a liberty changes or a move changes to that cutting point that's relative to that cutting point, if there's a liberty relative to the cutting point, then we need to reread it. So now we read it. This is an Atari, so we can't just fix. And we can't just take because we get captured. So we have to run. And now you see there's 2 liberties. Now we're trapped. So if a liberty changes, reread it. Reread it. Okay? But he didn't do that. He played here. And if your opponent goes inside like this and plays crazy stuff like this, just surround, push them to the edge. Even if they live. Who cares? Even if they live. Just surround and keep them trapped against the edge. Even if this was 2 eyes, which you don't know about yet, but even if, let's say, it's a living group, who cares, right? In this case, it's still dead because black can't go anywhere. And if black goes somewhere else, you play 1, boop, boop. Okay? We'll learn more about that as we learn Life and Death, but for now, just the basics are surround, push to the edge, surround, push to the edge. That's how you deal with stuff like this. And your opponents usually don't know how to handle it. So he plays here. Okay, now he's trapped. And so he played outside, so I'm going to play outside. Okay, now he played here. This one created a lot of cutting points. Okay, so again, we have our third line sequence, which is push to the edge and block, turn, block. And you see how he has 2 liberties? He's trapped against the edge. There's Tiger's Mouth, so there's no cutting point. There's a cutting point here, but it's 2 liberties to 3 liberties. So we win the race. And is there any liberty problems? 2 liberties, but I'm connected. Connected. So the only liberty problems are on these 2, so it's 1, 2, 3 to 1, 2, so we're okay. So that's our third line sequence. But if you don't know that, that's fine. My first instinct is to connect my stones. So I Atari him out and fix my cutting points. In this case, I had 3 cutting points. When you have multiple cutting points, it becomes a little bit difficult, but we just handle it 1 cutting point at a time. We read 1 cutting point at a time. If your opponent rushes you, don't worry about it. Just ignore them. So the first thing I did was, if I ignore, my opponent cuts here. Here. 3 cutting points, very dangerous. In this case, it doesn't work, but maybe our opponent changes the order or something. So it's 3 cutting points, probably you want to defend. If you're unsure and you have 3 cutting points, just defend. The only reason you would not defend 3 cutting points is if you read black plays here, black plays here, and black plays here, and none of them work. No matter the order. Here, 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 or let's say here, 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 nothing works. Like, if we read that nothing works, then we don't have to defend. But with 3 cutting points, it's more likely to work than it's not. So at 3 cutting points, we want to go ahead and just consider defense. Okay? So I started with the edges first. So let's start with the edge. Defend this cutting point. He plays. I push him to the edge. He plays. I'm an Atari, so I'm going to connect or capture, whichever one. he plays. Now here, maybe it's like, oh, I think it works because 1, 2, 3 to 1, 2, 3, 4. But wait, 4 to 3, I push him to the edge. Now it's 2 to 4. So actually, it doesn't work. And this is probably the first one I wanted to go with. So I could have just stopped here and just kept going. But maybe not everyone reads that. Maybe you started with this side. Okay, so I defend here. I cut, push to the edge. I cut, capture. Oops, I die. So who knows, right? Sometimes that works. Okay, and then when that happens, you're like, oh, maybe this isn't the one I want to fix. There is another order that you can do. It's if this Atari doesn't work, try just fixing and see if he's trapped. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's another sequence that you might consider. But this comes with practice and experience. I don't expect you to know this right off the bat, and that's fine. If you don't see that, that's fine. You'll learn it as you read more and more and more and get more game examples. And this is why we recommend playing like dozens of 9x9 games while you learn these cutting points, the ins and outs of these cutting points. But the more you learn, the more you'll be able to read these sequences. But if you see it working for your opponent, then don't play this one. And the other one was like, first check the edges, then check the center one. So I checked the center one. Cut, push to the edge. Cut, fix my cutting point. He runs, 3 liberties to 4 liberties. I push to the edge. Okay, so this one actually looked easier to respond to than the other one. And an even easier sequence was if I fix here, push the edge. Push to the edge. This is the one that I'm worried about, right? If he cuts here, I capture. If he blunt, I captures. And he's trapped on the inside. I have no issues. So this one is actually the one I was going to play because it's just the simplest. But with 3 cutting points, you saw I was taking a lot of time. That's okay. It's good to take your time, especially with cutting points. If you're going to use your time anywhere in the game, use it at cutting points and really figure out what's the way to defend where you don't die. Because that's the way you're going to lose the game, is something getting cut and dying, right? That's the way you'll lose the game almost instantly. So it's okay to take your time. My opponent rushed me and left. Who cares? I was taking my time. As long as you still have clock time, that's okay. If you use all of your time and just let it run out, then you just wasted your opponent's time. You should still play a move. Don't time out, but if you have time on your clock and you want to use it, that is your right. If they don't like it, they should have lowered the time settings, right? Don't let them rush you. You play as you need. Okay. So multiple cutting points, just defend. But again, the third line sequence actually existed here, which is push to the edge, he runs, you block him from escaping and keep him trapped against the edge, and there was nowhere for him to go. So that one actually did work here. But this maybe is more 23, 24Q than 25Q. So if you didn't see that, that's okay. But this one does lead to 3 cutting points, so it was a little bit more difficult. But sometimes this happens. Sometimes you find yourself with 3 cutting points. Just take it 1 cutting point at a time and check the simplest one that you see defends your cutting points. How you read it, you just say your opponent cuts and you push them to the edge. Check the liberties, check the cutting points. Check the liberties, check the cutting points. That's all it is. Liberties and cutting points. This 3-cut sequence is maybe very difficult to read out for this level, but if we take it 1 at a time, we check the cutting points and check the liberties, that's how we read at this level. That's all it is. Attack and defense at this level. Just reading. Sorry, not reading. It's cutting points and liberties. Cutting points and liberties. That is attack and defense at this level. That's all you need to read. Nothing else. Don't worry about fancy stuff. Don't worry about counting how many points he's getting. Just read the cutting points. And when you're fine, go play a big move. Open corners, open side. Push the borders. Open corners, open sides, push the borders. Or watch the borders. I should probably say watch the borders. Block yours, push your opponents. Block yours, push your opponents. Watch the borders. Okay? If your opponent plays inside, push them to the edge. And we'll learn these sequences and gain experience as we go. Just keep playing 9x9s until you feel comfortable with these cutting points and feel comfortable blocking your borders. Once you're comfortable with blocking your borders and cutting points, that's when it's time to move up to 13 by 13. All right. So that'll conclude our third video in this Clossi approach for 25